It only takes about 50 minutes to get to Bruges from Brussels by train. Again, it's another scenic train ride, beautiful countryside. It's very flat up here. This is the lowlands, of course. There's no mountains in Belgium, hardly any hills. It's all flat, mostly dairy pasture land. Checking up on the local currencies, it's handy to bring a calculator along on your trips and try and figure out where we are and where we're going. That's generally the location of Belgium on the map in the north of Europe, nestled in between France and Holland. Most people skip over Belgium, or if it's Tuesday, maybe they'll pass through for half a day. But it's well worth a visit. There's other cities in this country, such as Liège, that are equally beautiful. And Bruges is one of the prettiest in the world, as you'll soon find out. Arriving in the Bruges train station, and it's just a short taxi ride to our hotel. We check in, and then we head right out into the city of downtown Bruges. Bruges has a unique history which has resulted today in the largest collection of well-preserved historic old buildings that date back to the Middle Ages. 600 years ago, Bruges was the most powerful economic trading city in all of Northern Europe. In those days, it was a coastal city with a fine harbor and a thriving merchant class, so that goods would trade back and forth from England to Europe and from Scandinavia to Europe, passing through the harbor of Bruges. But then something happened to the harbor. It silted up, and Bruges was cut off from this thriving trade, and everything was left intact, perfectly preserved as you see it here today. It's a city that's been left alone by history, sealed in its own little time capsule, and it's just a great place to visit. First thing you want to do when you arrive is have some Belgian waffles, though. Sit down and have a snack, have some food, and build up some energy, and get ready for the tour that we're about to take. Delicious.
Wow.
Good stuff.
This is the life.
We used to go in. The only way to see Bruges is to take a walk and then take a little boat ride, as we'll do shortly. It's a great city for walking because it's very compact, and window shopping. Lace is one of the specialties here in Bruges, as it is throughout Belgium. Now we've entered the main square that has the old Gothic city hall and several old churches. This city hall was constructed in the 14th century and reconstructed and embellished in a Baroque and Rococo style on the exterior. And on the inside, there is a classic Flemish interior with an arcaded lobby, and then you walk up this red carpeted stone staircase into the main chambers upstairs, a Gothic hall that dates to the year 1402. They made incredibly elaborate public spaces in those days. The quality of life 600 years ago in many ways was better than the quality of life that we enjoy today. When you walk around a small town like Bruges, you're impressed by the overall cohesive quality and the beauty and tranquility of the place. Graceful bridges, medieval Gothic arcades, cobblestone streets, the ranks of aged medieval structures all bring the visitor into awe and appreciation for these times gone by. It's a city constructed largely of brick, carefully hand-built by the craftsmen of the Middle Ages. Bricks and bicycles, two of the hallmarks of this ancient town. And they get around by horse cart too, but that's reserved largely for the tourists nowadays, naturally. This is a city of dreams and magic. You're transported back hundreds of years when you wake up in Bruges. The old canals, graced with these brick buildings and drooping trees hanging their branches into the water. The mirror reflection of the buildings in the early morning is a true sight to behold. It's certainly worthwhile getting up early if you're visiting Bruges and take an early morning stroll before the hordes of tourists hit the streets. After all, this is a pretty lively and busy, attractive town. Because it's so beautiful, it attracts thousands of visitors every day. One way to avoid it is to take that early morning walk and then just join in with the mobs later in the day. There's a flea market on the banks of the canal. Even though Bruges is located in the 20th century, it still embraces the old ways, such as taking time to stop your bicycle and have a chat with your neighbor and catch up on the news. The local people do indeed get around by bicycle, as typical of the Dutch and the Belgians, or you can get around by boat. These tourist excursion boats will take you on a 45-minute canal ride. There's about a dozen different companies in town, and they all offer basically the same service, so you just go to one of the tourist stands and sit on a bench and wait your turn, and soon enough the boats will come by and pick you up and give you a ride. You'll see some beautiful parklands as part of your ride. There's greenery located all throughout this town of Brugge, and the animals in the gardens are very well taken care of. Here's our Hawaii tour bunch waiting its turn to get on the excursion boat, and we float like swans, enjoying a peaceful view of these buildings gliding by. These canals are remnants of the great river system that once supported Brugge. The River Zwin was the main avenue of commerce for the goods that left the harbor of Brugge and went out to England and Scandinavia. But then back in the Middle Ages, that harbor filled up with sand and mud, and the city was at that point cut off from further development. Therefore, it was never rebuilt by the Industrial Revolution, and it was never modernized. The 19th century never really got here to Brugge. So the bulldozers never came, the buildings were never knocked down. There's no McDonald's built in Brugge. It's strictly old Renaissance style and Baroque style and Gothic buildings covered with ivy, beautiful terraces, trees hanging out over the canal, a wonderful mix of the best of old-fashioned architecture. The canals add a magical element to the beauty of Brugge, whether you're enjoying them from the boat or from the banks watching swans gliding by, graceful arched bridges in the background. Every place you look, there's another bridge crossing the canals of Brugge. It's so peaceful to watch the leaves of the trees dance over the waters of the canals with a backdrop of bricks. Brugge probably has the finest collection of brick buildings any place in the world. Just as the craftsmen of Italy worked in marble and those of France used stone as their building blocks, the craftsmen of Brugge used the materials most readily available to them, which was brick, resulting in this incredible ensemble of ancient buildings. It's somewhat similar in architecture and layout to the much more famous and nearby city of Amsterdam, but because of the special qualities of Brugge that we've discussed, it's like Amsterdam might have been 200 years ago, and yet you can see this today in Brugge. So it's definitely worth a visit if you're in Northern Europe and looking for a charming out-of-the-way spot. That completes our visit to Brugge, and now we're moving along